So now we can just talk about stuff.
Sure. We can just talk about stuff. That works. Yeah.
So you're talking about some guy that, say it again.
Brandon Sanderson. So he has this one world that he is looking at creating where the magic system on the world is about it's centered around diseases. So you catch a disease and it gives you magical powers, right? And that's how all of the diseases and magic system works in this world.
Okay, so it's almost flips it around. A disease isn't a bad thing. It's kind of a good thing because you get a superpower from it.
Sometimes,
Well,
yeah,
it goes the other way too.
it can go. Well, I mean, you're still affected by the disease. So if the disease is fatal, but it makes you super powerful, well, I mean, if you're running into a circumstance where you're going to be killed anyways, it makes sense because you now can accomplish whatever you needed to accomplish, right? So, but anyways, so he was working on this, and he was working on it right around the COVID timeframe, and then COVID happened, and he shelved the whole thing.
Okay.
he's like, yeah, wrong timing. I need to flesh that out a little bit better.
Well, maybe we'll talk about him on the show. We're going to get started here pretty soon. You've been eavesdropping on Synergy Cafe. So let me go get this party started.
Greetings, Internet friends. Welcome to another episode of the Synergy Cafe online show, featuring speaker, entertainer, close-up illusionist, and marketing alchemist, Magic Brad. It's the Internet lifestyle show about career, finance, relationships, spirituality, and wellness. We're moving the online chatter over to real-life activity. And now, please welcome your host of Synergy Cafe, Magic Brad.
Should. We're here. Hey, ladies and gentlemen, boys and berries, another Magic Monday here on Synergy Cafe, and I got my co-host, Casey Pink.
How you doing?
Dun, dun, dun. You heard us earlier talking about some bizarre, weird thing about viruses. This is a fiction guy, though, right?
Yeah, Brandon Sanderson writes fiction.
All right, because you never know. There's a lot of woos and weirdos out there, and I'm one of them. So today, our topic, because I've been revisiting if you remember the movie The Secret. Remember The Secret?
No.
Really? Get
No.
out of here.
I don't think I've seen it. I might have, but I don't think so.
It was all about how your thinking manifests reality. And then it was controversial because people talk about, okay, you focus on what you want with affirmations, and this is what then ends up manifesting. It's kind of like if you want to learn Japanese, if you go to Japan, everybody around you talking Japanese, eventually you're going to talk Japanese because you're immersed in it.
Right.
So same kind of thing. If you want to make $1 million and everything you think about is making $1 million and you're focused on making $1 million, eventually you'll make $1 million because that's all you think about. So it's kind of like that. And people it got kind of controversial because people were going, I want a Lamborghini in my driveway. I want a Lamborghini in my driveway. And then they wouldn't get it because you got to take action because we're on a physical plane in the physical world. So you got to do something to manifest that money. So some people that thought, I can just pray for it and it pops into gear. It doesn't work that way. You have to do something to make things happen. But so it was that kind of popped up on my internet feed, and then also the law of attraction, the concept of things will come to you when you think about them, and Abraham Hicks, that kind of thing.
Sure.
And then you had mentioned something else. I forgot what it was, but that's what happens.
The quantum teleportation.
Yes,
you were talking about earlier.
Quantum physics and stuff. The concept of the microcosm. There's the bigger stuff where we're the Earth and there's the sun, and then around there's other stars and other galaxies, and it also goes the other way where you take a molecule and you chop up the protons and the neutrons, and then you rip it open and there's little strings and quarks and how far does that stuff all go down there? You go down that rabbit hole.
That's
Yeah.
funny.
'Cause-
Yeah, quark actually means how much. It's the theoretical smallest unit. That's whenever they created it. It was the theoretical smallest unit in the galaxy. And as a joke, the guy who created it named it quark, which means how much.
Okay, I don't quite get the joke, but I kind of get the joke.
It was basically they were trying to measure the smallest unit in the universe, but of course it's not really measurable. So he called it how much.
Yeah.
It was a nerd joke.
But it's that kind of thing like that. I always have a hard time explaining this kind of stuff, but I get it in my own head of the wave particle,
Mhm.
where if you're observing it, is it a wave where it's moving or is it a particle where it's still? Kind of like if you're flying in flying in an airplane and you got a baseball in your hand, how fast is that baseball going?
Sure.
It's going the same speed as the plane from outside there, but then you get into your seat, the baseball's not moving anywhere.
Right.
So it depends on how you observe it. And I think that's how stuff ends up being manifested. If you conceive something, an idea. Say, for example, we're going to create, because we want to maybe someday do these things as a live event where there's people in the studio audience. So we start thinking about that. And you have to observe it and you have to stay focused on that concept for a long time. Because if you don't, and you all say, okay, we're going to start work on another project. Now all of a sudden it doesn't manifest because we're not focused on it.
Right.
So it's kind of like the magnifying glass with the sun. You got to burn the wood. You got to keep it focused. As soon as you take it off, it cools off and it doesn't burn. So life is pretty simple, but it's difficult.
Yeah, I would say so. Manifestation is a very interesting concept, and I don't think I know that not everybody buys into it. Some people believe in it, some people don't. I would say probably a lot of stage magicians would believe in it because you guys are literally kind of creating the reality people see.
Well, we're creating illusions as far as magicians.
Right.
And a lot of magicians are atheists. They don't believe there's this higher power. They think that something else.
Sure. Well, I mean,
But-
atheism is, of course, they just don't believe in God. It doesn't mean that there's nothing else. It just means that there's no God.
Well, that's an interesting topic because I see a lot of atheists and I don't understand how they can deny their own topic.
Yeah.
So there is no God, yet we're going to talk about it.
Right.
How does that work? And I think they have to rephrase their question is there is no their topic. Like, what form is God? Is God an actual person or deity? Or is it a energy?
Yeah. That's a complicated topic. That's delving into the heart of metaphysics.
Well, some people look at, okay, I read this book and this book tells me about all these things that happened and, turning water into wine and all this stuff. That's just a bunch of phooey and all that kind of thing. But it might be a metaphor. Maybe it's not that literal,
Right. Well, I mean,
biblical thing.
if you believe, what's it called? Mushrooms and the Church, written by the same guy who did the Dead Sea Scrolls. He has this whole thing in there where he talks about how it actually we don't really understand the nature of what it's actually talking about because we're missing some of the language that they had back then. So the referencing of certain terminology in there was actually referencing mushrooms. So, eat of my body and the drink of my blood was actually talking about dosing yourself with mushrooms.
Okay, so that's a different church.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like you go up and you put the little wafer on the bread. I get it.
Yeah. So it's interesting. Like that's one theory that's out there. I would have a tendency to actually believe what the guy says though. He was a monk and he had a crisis in faith because he was translating a bunch of documents that led him down this rabbit hole.
Well, I think a lot of people, when they start having these discussions about that's you don't that isn't literal, and they have these arguments that it isn't real and all. I think they need to take a step back and figure out how can this actually work, because you can go down this negative thing like, okay, if man is a sinner and the book was written, um, is the inspired words of God,
Hmm.
but man is fallible, then maybe they wrote it down wrong.
Hmm.
They got the information but God, but they wrote it down wrong.
Right.
So you have to read the book and kind of understand it yourself. And that's why, for myself, I look at it as it's energy. Because
Yeah.
I think that was it Einstein that said that everything's energy?
Yeah. Yeah. Einstein said that that everything is energy, and pure energy can't be destroyed.
Yeah.
It only transforms from one thing into another.
Yeah, it recycles. So there ends up being karma, but a lot of Christians don't believe in karma or coming back. But
Reincarnation, yeah, they don't. A lot of Christians don't believe in reincarnation. However, I would think that there would be things in the Bible that would actually point towards the fact that there is forms of reincarnation mentioned in the Bible.
well, again, I think a lot of people that are stuck in their ruts of, I don't believe in reincarnation because that's a Hindu thing and that's not the real God. So that's why they might not believe in it.
Sure.
But when a child is conceived, where the hell did that come from? How did that work? How did you and I used to be just this concept
Right.
when we were conceived,
Right.
and then we grew. How does that work? That's kind of amazing.
It is.
So that's miraculous as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. I mean, full disclosure, I don't really consider myself Christian. I mean, one of the tenets of Christianity says that you have to accept Jesus Christ as the only Lord and Savior and your only way to heaven. And that's kind of where I break off a little bit there. And I'm like, I don't even, like, there's a certain deification of Christ that is kind of required to believe in order to really consider yourself Christian. I don't really believe that. I think that Jesus was as much of a prophet as the Buddha was, or any number of other Confucius, or any number of other people who were out there.
On that topic, that's where I go to. I think of Jesus as just a guy. He's a carpenter from Nazareth.
Yeah.
But he was really hip, and he maybe took some of that communion, and he figured out that there's this other thing out there, this source, and he knew connected with that. So when you accept Christ as your personal Lord and Savior, it's really just accepting that I, Brad, in this human form of 160 some pounds and 5'6", I've got this physical form. Oh, you're coughing.
Yeah, I went down the wrong pipe.
It's all good. But I got this physical form, and I went through this when I had I had a midlife crisis, and I woke up. But God is out there, and I'm down here. So to get to God, because I'm not God, I'm limited. That the way to get there is this Christ consciousness. That's that bridge. So it isn't necessarily Jesus, the guy.
Right.
It's the
concept.
The way to it.
Yeah.
So, and I've had situations where I felt like I was all knowing, and I've had situations where I was out of body, and I didn't have physical form. I was all that is. So I've had that connection. So it really isn't about accepting Jesus as your personal Lord and Savior. I think it's more accepting the Christ consciousness, or just the stuff between you and all that is. So there's a lot of stuff out there.
Yeah, that's another way of looking at it. But then again, that's where I go back to that concept, about what is a Christian, because like really if you have to accept that Jesus Christ is your only Lord and Savior and your only way to, that's where I say, yeah, it gets a little bit difficult for me. That's why I'm like, Yeah, I
If a
wouldn't consider
person
myself
really
Christian.
believes in Jesus, they're not really a Christian. They should be a Jesusite, maybe. I'm just
There you go.
making this stuff up. So to me,
That's
that
funny.
Christ is that bridge.
Yeah.
Again, the Christ consciousness.
But it was
And
interesting. You said something earlier that really that brought something to mind though. And this is something I actually get into a debate of a lot with people. So we were talking about, people they open up books and then they read the book and they're like, oh well, or the Bible in this case, and they're like, oh well, it has to be real. And then other people are like, well, it's not real. Well, we have to define what real is.
exactly. That's it.
I'm sure a lot of us don't really have the same definition.
Yeah. It's like with the atheist, you have to define what God is if we're going to be talking about that.
Right.
Before you can deny the existence of it, let's figure out what it is. So, what is real?
Yeah.
Because I've had situations like with magic. Some
Mhm.
people think that the coin actually disappeared. Because
Sure.
I've done magic to people in Jamaica. They go they're wild. They look at it as voodoo,
Mhm.
the macumba. And when the coin disappears, that freaks them out.
Mhm.
Whereas someone that's doesn't really believe that that happens would go, "Oh yeah, you tricked me. You're hiding it somewhere."
Mhm.
So they don't believe. But if they
Sure.
believe it, then it's some kind of work of the devil or something, or work of a higher power.
Right.
And there's people that do that kind of thing, like that psychic surgery where you can pay $5,000 and go down to El Salvador and have some guy put you on a table and take the cancer out of your stomach. And that's a trick.
Yeah.
But some people believe it. So is it bad if it's a trick? Because if you believe it, then you achieve it. So what if they do a
Sometimes they can
placebo
cure you.
psychic surgery on you? They didn't really do anything other than a trick, and then you believe it, which now gives no energy to this cancerous cell. And if you don't give it any energy, then it's got to go away.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. It's your reality is an interesting concept in and of itself. I think that as far as that overarching concept, I think that there's so many people who are just stuck on what is real. And let's go back to your coin trick. So you do the coin trick, and for the person who the coin disappears, does it matter whether it actually disappeared or not? No, they fully believe it disappeared, and it's a shared experience they can share with other people. By definition, if you're going by the official definition of reality, which is an objective, observable, shared experience, right? So you have this shared experience that you have with other people, and you're all agreeing that reality is something that we know didn't happen because you just you know didn't you made the coin disappear, but they all believe it disappeared, right?
Well,
And
you just flipped the coin on me, because if we all agree that the coin disappeared,
right.
and then all of a sudden we say that it was a trick, that it didn't disappear, then which is the reality? Did it actually disappear? Well, I guess it did, because it disappeared from vision.
But did it matter? That's what I'm saying. Does it really matter?
Well,
I don't think as far as
nothing
as
really matters except for matter.
well, I think in this particular case, though, I'm not sure it really. I'm not sure it really matters because, I mean, if you're talking about the concept of reality and whether or not that coin actually disappeared whenever you did that sleight of hand magic trick, and they all believe that it actually disappeared in their heart, you performed something grand, right? So that had a mystical experience for them, and that allows them to be able to move forward in a certain path in a certain way in life. It had a certain impact on them, and it actually helped them grow or become in a very specific way. Whereas if you think that it was a trick, right, it has you grow in a different way. So it
Mhm.
doesn't really matter because both experiences are valid. Both
Right.
experiences lead you down a path. Both experiences have consequences. And as we know with quantum reality, whenever you're talking about quantum reality, right? It's actually they've done this recently. They took the concept of Schrodinger's cat. I don't know if you know that. It's
No,
basically the cat in the box. So you take
I
the cat, you
vaguely
put it
heard.
in the box, then you close the box. You put like a little cyanide pill inside a contraption that goes off randomly, right? And then you put the cat in the box, and then you wait a little while, and then you open up the box, right? Is the cat going to be dead or alive? Until you open up that box, until you look inside, it's both dead and alive. And in fact,
Because you haven't confirmed it.
in one reality, you can open up the box, it can be right then, and then you get a big whiff of it, and you're dead and the cat's dead. So,
Okay.
you see what I'm saying? So according to Schrodinger's cat, all of these things are real until you open up the box and then firmly sink yourself into one of those realities by confirming
I get it.
yourself.
And you're right. Does it really matter? Because, like, okay, if you like going back to the religious stuff,
Yeah.
if I gave my life to Christ and I've been saved, when I die, I'm going to heaven.
Right.
Okay. So if that's the deal, who cares if I get hit by a truck? Doesn't really matter. Because I'm going to a good place.
Sure.
So it does matter. Like the reason I was going to this was because what if someone is doing one of these magic tricks and there's some charlatan psychic and they're bending spoons and you get a person to believe and they con you out of all of your money, and pretty soon you're like you lost your house, lost your family, and you
There's
die.
a lot of people into the bending spoon things right now. There's like people who run YouTube channels on bending spoons right now. It's a really interesting phenomenon.
Yeah.
Sorry, I know we were talking about something else, but you
But-
talked about the bending spoons.
But
and
it
I'm
is
like,
that
it's
kind of
interesting.
thing. If you believe that that spoon is actually bending,
Yeah.
and then someone takes you down another path and cons you out all your money, and then you die and you go to heaven, who cares?
Right.
'Cause the
You can't
money's
take
not-
anything with you.
Yeah. So they just accelerated your trip to heaven.
Right.
It's worth that $50,000 you lost.
Well, then what is reality? Is that the reality? Or is this the
Reality is
reality?
what you believe is reality.
Right. But I'm saying, let's say, okay, so your concept is you're gonna die and go to heaven, and then you die and go to heaven. Is heaven really reality? And this is all just a dream? Like,
To me, on that kind of thing is I don't believe that heaven is some destination
Right.
that's higher, and then hell is another destination that is lower, that's
Mhm.
hotter. Does it mean it's cold in heaven and it's hot in hell? I think it's a state of mind. Like you can feel like you're in heaven and you can be in a good spot, or you can feel miserable and you're in a hell spot.
Sure. Well, it's
So-
funny people say cold as hell
Yeah.
or hot as hell. Either way, it's an extreme. It must be hell, right? That's
Yes.
pretty much Minnesota most of the year.
The concept of belief is a big piece of it. Like with the spoon bending thing, I do that magically with
Sure.
sleight of hand. And I've been to events where people say, I got a friend that does that. No, he doesn't do it the magic trick. He does it real.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, no, he doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's the other thinking of it that, like in the movie Matrix, do you remember that?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Where the little kid says there is no spoon?
Yep, and then it bends. But the spoon's not really bending. It's just you're realizing it's not there.
Your belief that it's bending is bending. And there is no spoon.
Yeah.
It's just your concept of it.
Yeah, and there's a whole thing on TikTok, and people hold conferences on it and everything where they're talking about this whole spoon bending thing. That's why I was saying it's off the hook right now. Like people are actually going to these conventions.
Well, there's a magician
to
guy
learn about.
There's a magician guy, James Randi, that offers a reward to anybody that can do some of these psychic phenomena.
Yeah. Well, Penn and Teller do too.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you can do something and prove it, if you can perform any magic, and they mean real magic, as in like I'm gonna cast a spell and have a fireball run down Main Street. Not that that's, you know, really anything anybody's ever done. That's just in
You can create the
books.
illusion of it.
Yeah, right. But I mean, so they're saying though that okay, they're willing to give. I think it's up to $10 million or something like that. It's a lot. Penn and Teller's offering a lot.
It is. They're pretty confident in their thing. So was James Randi.
Yeah, and they just go around debunking stuff all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and in their head, they're saving people from these charlatans.
Right. And I think that there are physical laws that are above us, like the concept of gravity.
Sure.
Can't get around it. You can kind of create a way of with propellers, or you can figure out ways of with the airfoils and like with jets. And the Wright brothers did that to get the planes to fly. And now they've got other ways possibly of making things.
Unless you're a scarab beetle.
What?
There's this whole thing about scarab beetles that's out there if you look at it. So you take the like little shells on the scarab beetles. They don't really have wings that are big enough to actually make them fly. So they're wondering, like, these beetles, right? I don't think it's actually the scarab that's the flying one, but they're beetles, and they're wondering like how they fly. They're like, this doesn't make any sense. Same with the bumblebee. They're like, how does a bumblebee fly?
Right.
This doesn't make any sense because their wings really aren't big enough. Well, what they're finding out is actually the vibration that actually makes them fly. So they just kind of go, and that vibration makes them go, and they kind of float in the air. It's the reason why they bump into things so much, because they have less control over it than something that actually flies.
Yeah, so we're discovering other things
bumblebee
that are,
versus,
that are still of the physical world.
Right.
And it's interesting how we progress more. It's getting to be in the more not so physical because it's vibration.
Yeah. So going back to the beetle, though. So the beetle has the shell, right?
Yeah.
And so they have these, something happens with that beetle thing where whenever the wings flap, what they're really doing is they're creating an electrostatic charge. And the electrostatic charge goes to the shell, and the shell actually becomes lighter than air. So they've shown this in science. They take it and they do this like electromagnetic charge to the shell. It's like the little wing covers of these beetles, and they actually will just float there, and they'll just start floating. And so it's kind of an anti-gravity.
Sure.
It defies everything that we know about physics.
I think that's a possibility. I mean, if you start, keep an open mind, the way that a wing flies, it lowers the air pressure, increases the air pressure on the bottom and lowers it on the top.
Yeah. The path over the top of it is longer than the path underneath it. So the path underneath it keeps more molecules.
So the shell could kind of be that way too.
Well, but it's not. There's no airflow.
I know, but there's vibration. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So it's vibrating. So now there's airflow that way. It's vibrating.
It does shuffle molecules that way.
Yeah.
At least I would think it would do.
We're getting into some deep stuff. It's like how did those Egyptians make those pyramids with those big giant rocks?
Yeah. It's pretty fascinating. There's actually a guy in the United States that figured out how to use fulcrum in order to be able to move giant, massive blocks. And so he shows how they built the pyramid. He basically is like, yeah, this is all fulcrum force. And he just takes these massive blocks. I mean, they're so big they would crush cars. And him alone, by using fulcrum and force, he's able to get it to move and to pivot and to rotate and everything else with it. It's pretty fascinating. I've watched several clips of his.
You can have a big, giant, multi-ton piece of granite, and if it's on a little pin thingy, it could spin around. I can see that.
Yeah. Well, he uses planks, and he uses other blocks, and a bunch of things like that in order to be able to basically move these blocks all by himself and get them into position and raise them and lower them and move them all over the place. And he's like, yeah, this is how they built Stonehenge. This is how they built the pyramids. It's all just applied physics.
Yeah, and then somebody else is going to find an easier way.
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly it. Well, I mean, there's some of those things that were moved, like especially during the making of the pyramids. Supposedly they're so big that even modern machinery doesn't really move that stuff very easily. It even would have a hard
Yeah,
time.
because the modern machinery with hydraulics and all that kind of stuff
Yeah.
is using physical force, where now they're starting to use, like, would it be quantum forces, vibration, and stuff like that?
Yeah, or perhaps scarab shells.
Or something like it.
There's a theory actually, because there's like writing of it actually in ancient Egypt. There's like various different pictographs and writings of in their early form writings they had of
Hieroglyphics.
Yep, exactly, hieroglyphics.
That's the
And
stuff
they
that's up high on the wall, and stuff
Yeah.
below is called lower graphics.
Yeah. So they have these devices that basically these people would get on, and they would ride these like skiffs basically, but they would float and they would like fly through the air with them. That's the claim, is that they actually had things like this. Well, there's a guy who thinks that what they did is they figured out how these beetles flew, and they actually took a bunch of these electrostatic like little pieces and put it on the bottom of them. So they would basically just create this like electrostatic force from the
Like
wind,
a hoverboard.
like a hoverboard, to actually make it work. That's the theory. I don't know. I don't know how much of that I believe or don't believe. We just don't have any evidence of it now.
Well, maybe they'll start working on it. Maybe that's one of Elon Musk's tasks.
Or maybe we already have it and they just don't want to show us.
They?
The governments, or
The government?
maybe the big banks, or the government would not want us to know about that, because if they had something that worked like that, that would that could be weaponized very easily, and they're big into controlling anything that could be potentially used for massive weapon potential. They
Okay.
just don't talk about it.
How can that be used as a weapon?
Okay, so if you don't have any friction and you're able to, like, say, float something off the ground, right? Well, you don't need jet power, you don't need anything like that. That actually essentially gives you almost gravity control. That would be able to move in ways that other things can't. So you could
I see.
definitely use it as a weapon or a weapons delivery system. But if you had one that had no friction, that you floated in the air, had like a little jet or some other form of propulsion off the back of it, in theory doesn't have any limit to its speed, because it doesn't have any friction on the bottom of
You
it.
mean to be able to
means
create a projectile of some sort?
You create a projectile that way.
Yeah, I suppose. I can see that. But on that topic, we're going to shift a little bit over to the concept of war and militarization and weaponization and stuff. Because we've got all these other things where you could do like an electromagnetic, what do they call that?
EMP,
Yeah.
electromagnetic pulse.
Yeah. You just
like what
fry
happens.
everybody's phones and all the internet and all that stuff.
Yeah, we get them on solar flares, and also it's a side effect of nuclear fusion or fission. Sorry, nuclear fission.
But I think that some of these places that still do war the old-fashioned way of
Mhm.
blowing up buildings with missiles,
Mhm.
the reason for it is more psychological than effective.
Okay.
It's effective because people are psychologically hurt seeing their family getting killed and murdered and bloody and all that kind of stuff.
Sure.
And then other people feel sorry for those people. So there's this society thing. And I think that that's where the stuff is more powerful. I don't know why we're talking about this stuff. It's kind of gross, but I think that's why they use, because This is another thought too, that the whole money part of the military system, that they blow a bunch of places, now they got to replace the missiles. There's
Yeah,
money involved with all that stuff.
there is. There's a lot of money involved in
There
it.
is. That's why I would like to figure out a way we could monetize peace. That would be a cool thing because people could make a lot of money by being kind.
But peace is monetized. The problem is that it's not controlled by a few people. Peace is monetized. And we actually have some of the best during peacetime. We've actually had some of the best economies ever during peacetime. Just post World War II, contrary to popular belief, it wasn't the World War II itself that actually ended the Depression. It was actually a repeal of a whole bunch of taxes that happened post World War II. They repealed a whole bunch of taxes, and then the economy just boosted, and they started doing exceptionally well at that time frame. And we had some of the best economy we've ever had, and it was during peace. It was actually during a small. It was just a small window where there was literally no conflict in the entire
Well, it
world.
was during peacetime, but that wasn't the product. The product you're saying was lowered taxes.
Well, it was yeah. So they were able to lower taxes for people and things like that. But the product was the fact. Ever since everybody was at peace, they were able to just focus on what they wanted to create. So lots of people were creating things. I mean, if you go by broken window fallacy, having war is a good thing because you get lots of things broken, and then somebody has to make it right and fix it. But
Right.
if you're always building new wealth, and you're building new wealth, and instead of having to spend all of your time rebuilding the same wealth over and over again, you're building new wealth. So everything is like a stepping stone, and it builds on itself. But we can see evidence of that because there's been several different times where we've had major economic growth that's almost always happened during peacetime.
I guess I'm looking at, like I've posted a couple times, the idea of monetizing peace or incentivizing kindness. And if you could do that, then people would start opening the door and picking up trash and doing good things because they get paid for it.
I think that there's a lot of people who do a lot of stuff like that already. But to your point, if
Well,
somebody were to make an app and they were like, hey, here's a special device that you can hold and go out there and you pick up trash, and it shows
Yeah.
where you're picking up trash, and it knows that you're picking up trash and you're dumping it, and it pays you for every piece of trash that you pick up, we'd have an extremely clean society.
Yeah. Just to get somebody to, instead of stealing a catalytic converter, they can make just as much money by opening the door for some old lady.
Yeah, or yeah, something like
But
that.
you know what? There's not the rush of almost getting caught and all that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
I mean, you get that warm fuzzy when you open the door for the old lady, but the rush of almost getting caught and prowling around at night and how cool you were to be able to steal that catalytic converter.
Yes,
You
I
tell your
guess.
friends and all that. You don't want to go, hey, I went to the store and I opened the door for this old lady and she smiled. Or I could tell you a story of, man, we went and stole this catalytic converter. The cops were coming. They're shining flashlights on us. We almost got caught.
I'd rather hear about the old lady.
I kind of would too.
Yeah.
But it's
I
like,
think
it's the
it's,
Gawker thing. When you're going on the freeway, you see a bad accident, you slow down and look at it.
Sure.
Whereas if you see somebody, arm in arm waiting for the light to change green, you don't
Mhm.
really gawk at them.
Sure.
It's not exciting.
It would be a little weird, if you were in the other car and they're reaching across and holding each other's hands.
What do we got time here? 5:37. Okay, what else should we talk about? We have someone that made a comment on our thing over there, but
Oh,
I
yeah.
can't reach it, so I can't look. We'll have to look tomorrow. It might be our friend Mike. And I can't
Nice.
see that little red dot on there, so I don't know. There might be 100 comments on there. I don't even know it.
Yeah. Yeah. We'll have to pull up the comments on here next time.
We could either do that, or when we do a live studio audience, they can raise their hand and we can actually talk to humans.
That
That'd
would
be
be
really
nice.
bizarre.
That'd be really cool. It would be nice to have another person to play off of.
It
to
would.
like interview people and just have them
Yes.
come in and just hang out with us.
Questions,
That'd be
please.
fun. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Get some more people involved. Maybe get a way for them to call in
Yep.
and then call and ask us questions.
We could do that
Yeah.
if there's people listening.
Yep, that would be absolutely cool. I know one of the things I asked people to do is go to my. I asked some people to go to the MycoShift page. I
Mhm.
was asking them to put some questions on there. I didn't see any questions, but to be fair, I did not check right before we started.
Well, let's chat about that stuff a little bit. We might get kicked off of Facebook or LinkedIn or YouTube and stuff because we're talking about what I believe is suppression, but not necessarily. It might be what they've got to do. But I don't think I get as much engagement on social media as I used to get. It seems like
Oh yeah,
I'm not getting it. But if you think about it, the way that Zuckerberg makes money is he sells advertising. So if I'm not paying to advertise this podcast,
sure.
then we're not going to get as much traction out of it. That's why I broadcast on multiple platforms. And if I'm going to go against someone like a Joe Rogan that's got considerably larger budget than I've got,
Hmm.
he's going to get the play rather than me.
Sure.
So how can we do that? By using social media and the internet, or is there a way of doing it the old way with the United States Postal Service or do this thing at a mall?
I don't know. I see people that end up making it all the time who are, just having casual conversations. It's just about getting to the right audience at the right time.
I'm glad you
And then
said
it
that
just builds from
because
there.
when we had our earlier conversation about what you believe. So in my head, if I believe that Zuckerberg is suppressing my traffic, that's my reality. So I have to stop that.
It's interesting that you mentioned that though. So there has been this thing that happened recently, where there was the whole stuff about TikTok being talked about in the government and everything else,
Mhm.
and then they ended up making them house the server farms here in the United States rather than in China. So all of the US traffic, they wanted them to go through US servers. So they made them bring US servers here and house stuff here. Everybody on TikTok is now noticing that the algorithm has completely changed. And now we're being shown more ads, we're being shown more products, we're being shown a bunch of things like that. And then all of the things that we did like in the past that we have literally deliberately followed are all being disincentivized, disincentivized, and that they're not popping up in our feeds anymore. And this is not just one person. This is like thousands and thousands of people are noticing it.
Interesting.
Yeah, and it all happened after the server farms moved here. That's very interesting.
It is because they've commercialized it differently than China might or other places in the world.
Well, I mean, it was already a very successful model. I think that the the biggest telltale sign was whenever they were talking about having everybody move it. About them moving all the traffic here and everything else. One of the things that they were talking about in Congress was they were giving a speech about like going through all the people who were watching TikTok, and they were like, yeah, so the average person spends this much time on TikTok. It's got this many views, blah, 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 blah. And then he turned around to, it was like, people from Netflix and from Amazon Prime and all these bunch of other different platforms that were there. And then he goes, yeah, wouldn't you like to get that viewership back? So it's literally what it was all about, was getting that viewership back. And now all of a sudden the algorithm is different. And now it's not the mode of free speech that it was before, which is what a lot of people liked about TikTok before. Is it really lacked censorship. They did not censor very much. The censorship was very low. So
Mhm.
it's an interesting topic. I think that there's a lot of censorship that's going on out there that I don't know why the censorship is going on the way that it is. There's a lot of conspiracies that are out there on why it's going on, but I think it's pretty obvious that it's going on.
Well, it could be self-censorship because you get these people that have these platforms and they have some kind of debate on like pro-life or pro-choice or political or whatever, and they have moderators. So if someone comes on, say we're doing a thing about Trump and Biden, and I'm a pro-Trumper and you're a pro-Biden person, and we're having this debate back and forth, and the moderator, whenever you say something about Biden, the moderator shuts you down, and or someone in the chat starts talking about dissing Trump, and then
Mhm.
they shut them down. So it could be that the moderators are doing that kind of stuff, not necessarily the
Well, I mean, it's coming out in Congress. They're holding a bunch of meetings about it, and they've been doing this for a while now, where literally there has been force from the government going out telling them, "Oh yeah, you need to do this."
you
So
need to do what?
the censorship doing like they're basically choosing what gets to get heard and
Oh, I
what
see what you're
isn't
saying. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
heard.
Because there's that kind of thing where the government is involved with,
Mhm.
we want Twitter to do this, we want YouTube to do that, we want Google to do this.
Yep. And
Yeah,
they were allowed to do it because of the Patriot Act laws.
yeah,
Patriot Act laws that got implemented after 9/11.
right, for our
They
safety.
gave them a bunch of ridiculous rights. Now, I mean, it it was I think we talked a little bit about this last time too. And the thing is that if you look at that what happened during that time frame, there was this big shift in just the way that we as Americans like saw the way that things happened and experienced the way that things happened in the United States during that time frame. It's just suddenly a lot of things went out the window, and we've just never gone back to the way things were beforehand, which is sad because pre 9/11 there was a lot more openness in the media. There wasn't near as much of this picking and choosing what people get to hear. It was basically everybody got a voice, and you got to pick and choose who you wanted to listen to.
Well, you could go with your friends to the airport and see them off at the gate.
Yeah,
Now you
yeah.
can't even get in there.
My dad used to take me to the airport just to watch the airplanes take off and land.
Yeah,
I thought it was awesome.
can't
And
do that no more.
apparently it was my first word was airplane.
Oh, yeah,
At least that's the story I heard.
yeah, and it's all to protect us.
Yeah. So it's kind of a weird thing, and it really is affecting a lot of of the free speech on the internet and a lot of the censorship that happens on the internet. I was hoping it wouldn't go that direction whenever everything was originally moving towards more and more censorship and you started seeing it in the media and everything else. I was really hoping that it wouldn't touch the internet because the internet in its early days was completely run by a bunch of anarchist hackers who believed in free information for everybody.
Mhm.
And that's really like the hacker mentality during the time frame. It was literally a philosophy. They actually believed in the freedom of information that was out there.
Mhm.
They want to know how things work, how you can exploit them, and how they could turn that into a way that people could hear more and more information.
Yeah, it's interesting in that do we really need someone to censor someone, or could we work on educating people not to say stupid shit that's mean?
Or we could self-censor, which is the way I think it should go. Because like if I
Like
don't want
that?
yeah.
Yeah,
If
just don't listen.
right. If you don't want your kids to see porn, you block porn sites. It's not that the porn sites don't exist. You block them so kids can't get to them. Right?
Mhm.
That's what you do. So it's the same thing. If I don't want my child to see something, that's a whole different story than the government not wanting me to see something
Right.
or Zuckerberg not wanting me to see something. Like that's ridiculous.
Well,
They
all
built
that
a
stuff.
platform. There's a platform to use, and I know a lot of people would say just don't use the platform then. Well, I mean, that's a short-sighted view of it too, because if you allow for these pseudo government entities, and I'm going to call them that because we're not in a capitalist society. Let's just be completely fair about that. We are in a corporatist society. In a corporatist society, these large corporations have a lot of power. They have a lot of power. They get a bigger voice than a lot of other people do,
Right.
because they own a lot of dollars. They own a lot of personnel. They own a lot of product. They own a lot of lot.
Mhm.
So they get this big, huge voice that they get to push their own agenda.
Right.
And if we allow these large entities that are deeming to go into the realm of media, and we don't hold them to the same standards as, you know, in 1907, we would have held, uh, Star Tribune to during that time frame. I think that was, that and the Times, I think, are one of the two medias that I can think of that were still around during that time frame. But we held them to a standard. If they said something that wasn't true and they were caught, because they did it a lot, but if they were caught, they got in trouble. They got fined. They had to print retractions. They had to apologize. People stopped
Right.
listening
And
to
now they
them.
don't listen to the people anymore. They don't have those
They
little.
don't care.
Yeah.
They don't care. It's more about them being able to bend your ear in the way that they want. They would rather be able to, going back to the beginning topic, they would rather hide the coin from you and tell you it disappeared. That's really
So
the
going
truth.
back to the whole self-censorship thing, could you just say, I'm not listening to your ads. I don't want to, like the vaccination thing, and you're trying to push this stuff on. I'm just not going to listen to your ads. I'm not going to take your free injection. I'm just not going to do that.
That's the way that I do it. That's why
Yeah.
I don't watch
But I think that
regular
would be an easier
media
way to
anymore
do
either.
it. Like granted, if you got a young child that doesn't know any better and they go on their iPad and they go, oh my God, there's a naked man or woman. If you raise your kid right, they'll say, I'm not going to look at that stuff, and they'll stop it and they'll get rid of it.
Once they're at a certain age.
Yeah.
But
So
I
to
think
bring
whenever
them
they're
up
young, they're
right,
still vulnerable.
they are, because they don't know any better.
And to be fair, for males, until they're about 24, they really lack self-control, and we don't have brains at that point. I
That's
mean,
right.
it's really true. When I was 16,
Well, what if they
I
teach
mean,
that? What if you could teach discipline and self-control and all that kind of stuff?
right. I believe that self-control is a real thing, and I believe that it is necessary to learn that sort of stuff. But I also don't believe that if you're flashing naked men or women, whatever it is that 16-year-old boy happens to be into, and it flashes on that screen, there is definitely a part of their brain that shuts down.
You mean people are doing this subliminal type stuff?
Well, no, I'm just saying, things popping up like an advertisement or a pop-up. Like, you remember the old internet days? You would go on anything and then all of a sudden porn would just start flooding and popping up all over your screen because you went to one website and it happened to have a whole bunch of pop-ups in it. And no matter how fast you closed them, they opened more. You finally control alt
Sure, that's
delete,
a
shut down.
programming thing where they made it so that little X thing that's supposed to close the window actually opens up in a window.
Well, it's just pop-up. So basically the pop-up was set for whenever you leave the website, it actually redirects you to another website instead of having
That's what I'm
closed the
saying. It's a
website.
programming
Yeah.
thing.
So
And
the pop-up ads were just insane back then. But my point is, we don't have that problem anymore. But I mean, we still have a lot of other problems. And what I'm talking about is more of the psyche of a 16-year-old male. A 16-year-old male, really, their brain does not, their executive functioning
well,
falls away.
we're almost done here, but that it might be a topic to talk about, because on the other side, the females, they're learning that their sexuality can be very manipulative, and you got young girls that are doing this these dances and all that kind of stuff.
Some of them are, yeah. I think that there is a lot with the female empowerment, which encourages women to delve into who and what they are. But really, when it comes to young males, like they've literally done science on it that shows that whenever young males are flooded with hormones or anything like that, and I'm not talking about from the inside, I'm talking about from the outside. So you walk into a room, this is actually a study that was done. If you walk into a room and in that bar there is a bunch of females, right? And there's one female in there who currently is ovulating, every single woman in there gets rated higher on the scale of attraction.
Mhm.
Every single woman ends up higher on the scale of attraction. And not only that, but the other thing that they showed, and they did this because they made them take IQ tests and all kinds of stuff on the spot when they were doing it, is that males, whenever they come into contact with that, their IQ points drop by at least 10 points. So 16-year-old boys, like 16-year-old boy is just like that's like a trap for them. Something like that happens, and all of a sudden they're just like, duh. I remember being that kind of
Flip on a
brainless.
stupid switch, right?
It does. Now, it doesn't mean that they should be excused for bad behavior, or that bad behavior is to be expected, right? That's a whole different topic.
Yeah, you need to reinforce that and realize that, okay, I got to
Right.
be more on defense because I'm going to get stupid when I walk into this club.
Right. Exactly.
Okay, we got to shut it down because we've gone for, what are we at now? 5:55. We started at 4:44.
That's pretty
Now
good. We're 5 minutes
5:55.
shy. It's 6 o'clock, but
I
you got to
like
be
that.
somewhere at 6 today.
I do. It's always something.
Yeah, so we
So
can't.
how am I going to get
close
there
down
by
at
6? It's only 5 minutes. I got to get over to Fridley by 6 o'clock.
All right.
Time bending.
Yeah.
Okay, buddy, we did it again.
Yeah.
Another
absolutely.
episode. Okay,
We'll
I
do
gotta
more.
turn this off.
Yeah, send us information on stuff you would like to hear us talk about, or questions, or stuff
You know how
like
to get a
that.
hold of us.
And we would love to answer your questions live.
Peace. See ya. Bye.